Hello, and a massive warm welcome to this week's edition of the Soul Sync podcast. Where is the sun in England at the moment? Where is it? I tell you, the spring equinox has passed us by, and I am waiting eagerly on the edge of my seat every single day, wishing for the sun to come out, because I love the sun. I'm sure we all do, but as soon as it hits me in the face, it instantly lifts my mood. Now, if you're clicking on this podcast for the very first time, wondering what is the Soul Sync all about, well, welcome firstly, and let me tell you, we ask the questions that matter, to do with all things pertaining to the spirit world, energy, healing, crystals, astrology, ayahuasca. Honestly, the list is endless, but I'll tell you what, it's all designed to illuminate your path forward. And if you're joining us again, welcome back to the Soul Sync family. Now, this week's episode is an amazing one. I'm going to say that from the get-go. I love this guest, and it really is a true honour to have him join us. So please welcome our remarkable guest this week, Simon James, to the Soul Sync. Now, Simon James stands as one of today's most esteemed classical mediums and healers, embodying a living link to the illustrious British tradition of the early 20th century. Trained personally by the renowned Gordon Higginson, Simon's expertise stands far beyond the realms of mere mediumship. His profound understanding of mythology, the tarot, and ancient religions enriches his work, touching the lives of mediums, artists, and educators worldwide. With a true blend of humour, boundless compassion, and innate wisdom, Simon assumes the role of teacher, author, inspirational speaker, and medium with unparalleled grace. His journey has been one of deep exploration and enlightenment, reflecting in his transformative contributions to the field of spirituality. Simon's commitment to revitalising ancient wisdom lies at the heart of his collaborative efforts with Brian Robertson, resulting in the groundbreaking book Magician to Mystic, a Mediumistic Path to a Spiritual Life. Together they illuminate sacred principles behind transcommunication, guiding us towards a profound revelation of our own spiritual nature. Now, firstly, I loved this conversation. I could have spoken to Simon, honestly, for another couple of hours. We barely even scratched the surface. And I must say, I've read his book, and I've read a lot of books along my journey so far to do with spirituality, mediumship, so many different subjects. And I must say, his book was one of the most eloquent and eye-opening reads for me personally. And I just thought the book was so beautiful. It gave so much context and history, and it really made a lot of sense to me. And do you know what? I think it's a book for anyone who's interested in mediumship or the spirit world should read. So we're in for a true treat today with Simon. I hope you enjoy it. So Simon, thank you so much for joining us on the Soul Sync podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here and to talk to you, Jason. So thank you very much.
Now, I must say, from the get-go, we were going to have Brian with us as well today, who co-authored the book with you, Magician to Mystic, a Mediumistic Path to Spiritual Life. But he's a bit poorly today, so I send our love and best wishes, and it's just me and you today. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So I want to kind of jump straight in then, and to a bit of your background in terms of how you got into mediumship. As I said in the intro, you were one of only few sort of personally trained and mentored by Gordon Higginson. Tell us a bit about your journey into mediumship, Simon.
I came in purely through curiosity. As a child, I was aware of differences, but you read a lot of books, and I feel sorry for a lot of people coming into this today, because if you read a lot of mediums' autobiographies, they had these amazing experiences, they had spirit friends, all of this kind of stuff, which I just came in through purely curiosity. I'd had experiences, but it was literally inquisitiveness that took me into Wolverhampton Spiritualist Church. This is in the days before the internet and where you could just Google anything. This was the days of actually walking to a physical library. Yes, I'm that old. So I was looking, and this was the 80s. So I was looking at really the esoteric tradition. So I'd been reading the tarot since I was 13. So I'd really done a lot of studying the sort of the wider shores of esoterica. And I was just interested in spiritualism from the point of view of what that looked like and what that meant. So I walked into Wolverhampton Spiritualist Church in the late 80s, I think about 86. And, I joke, I walked in and never left, and it was by going to Wolverhampton Spiritualist Church that I began my mediumistic development. But I'll be honest with you, I walked into the church not looking to hear from anybody, even though I'd lost grandparents and so on and so forth. But I was actually looking for God. I was looking for some kind of experience with the divine. That was my primary aim. I wasn't looking for somebody to tell me what to do. That was what I went in for. And it was my journey through Wolverhampton Church that ultimately led me to meet Gordon Higginson. Now, I know you've already spoken with Paul. So Paul and I began our journey together in different ways. And it was Gordon who put us together. And I'd met Paul at Wolverhampton briefly. And then I was down at the Arthur Findlay College as a student, and that's where I met Gordon for the third time. And he took me under his wing. Now, again, many people think that Gordon teaches people from the get-go, but he really taught you once you've been working. And that's when he began his training. And so I was just flabbergasted when he came to me when I was at the college, and I was sitting in the library and listening to him lecture with Coral Polge. And we applauded him. And as he walked past, I was just, looking away. And as he stopped at my chair, he touched me on the shoulder. He says, one day, he says, you will be up on the platform and people will be applauding you. Well, I mean, you could have knocked me down with a feather, because I wasn't even doing anything at that point. And I thought, good grief, this is just insane. And from that point on, Gordon took an interest in my mediumship and encouraged my development and began my training. And he put Paul and I together. And that's where we began working the churches, doing demonstrations, and began our teaching career at the Arthur Findlay College alongside Gordon. And, I will be now at this age, I am so forever grateful and blessed that I was able to come under his teaching. And as I said, Paul and I were the last two he taught.
What do you think he saw in you? Why did he tell you why he selected you as such?
Well, again, Gordon never really said anything directly. It's not like today where, you would explore your feelings and all of that kind of stuff. That wasn't the way. But and he would never tell you how to do something. You had to find out for yourself, as I know Paul has shared. But what he did want me to do at the Arthur Findlay College was introduce psychology into the teaching of mediumship, because I just come out of university with a psychology degree. Because my background is in psychology. I've got a degree and I've got a master's in psychology. So my background was in the psychological experience of mediumship. And so he really wanted me to introduce psychology into the college to work with both tutors and students, because of the psychological changes and the massive psychological changes that are inherent in the mediumistic process. Many people talk about, I get really emotional when I feel the spirit. And really what that is a point of unpicking what is that about. And really people find mediumship not to talk to the dead primarily, but basically to heal, to become whole, because mediumship is ultimately a transformative, transpersonal healing experience. Mediumship, ultimately talking to dead people, talking to the ancestors, if you will, is really a side effect of mediumship. That's not the primary drive from a psychological and emotional point.
You've kind of jumped really nicely on there to some of the questions I was going to ask a bit later, but I'm kind of glad we're getting stuck into it pretty quickly. I must admit, I just want to come on to this book, the book that you penned with Brian Robertson. It is by far, for me personally, the best book that I've ever read on mediumship or spiritualism. And actually, there were certain parts of it I found to be a bit uncomfortable in the reading because they illuminated certain things within myself that I wasn't perhaps
Excellent. That's
aware
great.
of. Yeah, it did. You mentioned in the book about, and it's mentioned several times throughout the book about mediumship, you needing to become healed in order to go
Mhm.
through this kind of process. Why do you think healing is so prevalent in becoming a medium? Because I've noticed myself, I think I need to heal certain things in order to go on. But why do you think you need to go through that experience as a medium?
Well, the problem is that mediumship, and this is where it gets controversial, and this is where it gets very uncomfortable for people. The actual act of mediumship, the mediumistic experience, is not for everybody. The world does not need a lot of mediums. What it needs is people having a mediumistic experience to become whole. That's what the world needs. Because not everybody's mind is capable of sustaining a mediumistic communication over a period of time. One, it's not healthy for a lot of people. I'm sure you've noticed at the Arthur Findlay College and wherever you've been, there are many people that come there that actually are there to find respite. They are trying to find understanding. They think they're coming to learn how to become a medium, but they're learning how to find themselves. And the biggest issue today is that mediumship has been commodified and on one level capitalized into a career experience when throughout the history of mediumship, since human beings literally fell out of the tree and started walking upright, the mediumistic experience was for the few, not the many. The reason being is that not everybody is capable of sustaining that intensity of literally mental dissociation, and because that's what mediumship is. And so the issue here is that the mental dissociation ultimately, like a stick stirring up the bottom of a pond, stirs up your own personal baggage. And so before you can even start to think about having some kind of clear experience with the ancestors, with the so-called spirit world, you have to basically deal with your own mud at the bottom of the pool.
I think what I've learned, I think a lot of people maybe go through a lot to get to the point of mediumship, a lot of trauma and a lot of, I speak from first-hand experience. That's what kind of made me spiritually wake up. And I thought myself that I was over some issues, but then the mediumship seems to put this really massive, almost like Wembley Stadium spotlight
Yeah.
on it. And I've noticed that from the times I've tried to connect and my mind isn't clear because of something, you just can't do it. It's impossible, I find
That's
it.
right. That's right.
See, when you said about people kind of being able to mentally disassociate, is there some people that typically tend to, certain types of people that find this easier than others, or is it just?
Yeah, I mean, the big issue is that people, for many years, which it was never described, but for many years used this as a gift or that mediumship was special. No, it's not. It's just a quirk of your mind. That's all it is. It's no more a gift than being a good mother, a good father, a nurse, a doctor, someone a garbage collector, somebody who works at Starbucks. All of this is we are all special, but some individuals, like lots of other people, have a quirk in their mind that they can dissociate, and that's mediumship. Now, the biggest thing is that just because you can do that doesn't mean to say you should do that, because dissociation carries responsibilities for self, responsibilities for your own mental and emotional well-being, and also the emotional and mental well-being of the people that you're speaking to. That's the point. So what we are doing here, and what we do, Brian Robertson and myself, with the work that we do at the Inner Quest here in Victoria, Canada, and we put our teachings into the book, is try to create a safe space for everybody to have a mediumistic experience and find where that mediumistic ability needs to take them. That's the point of this.
It's very interesting. I must admit, I've looked at the courses that you do at the Inner Quest, and I'm definitely going to come on one. They look absolutely fantastic. What was magician to mystic? What was was it you that coined this phrase, magician to mystic? Was that your own?
It's ours. Brian Robertson and myself, we coined the term magician to mystic. And what the point is that mediums, and we're talking, and I just want to put a caveat here about the description of medium, because a lot of people associate medium, well, I'm just talking to dead people. Well, that's 1/10 of the iceberg. Mediumship is a span of all forms of human life, creativity, art, passion, anything that, whenever you find somebody that is good at what they do and is in their passion, that's mediumship, because ultimately they are in their passion, and in their passion they're in their divinity, they're in the divine, and they are moving. What we talk about evidential mediumship is a recognition that when we train evidential mediumship, whether that's also from the point of healing mediumship, altered states, communication, and so on and so forth, everybody goes through what we call the eager stage, the magician consciousness. This is when everybody has their first communication and they go, yay, hooray for Hollywood, I want to be a medium, this is amazing, wow, and that's normal. They get very eager and they just want to run with it. And that's what we call the magician consciousness, because it's the tricks. It's the trick stage. Look what I can do. The challenge with that is that someone who is coming from a place of less than in their life, or challenge in their life, they may then attach that to their self-worth. And so, if you will, they stay in that what we call magician consciousness, where it is all about the tricks, it's all about the wow factor. And I hear this phrase a lot, the wow factor, which I find horrific, because the very fact that you are human and you are experiencing the divine, that's the ultimate wow factor. And as an evidential mediumship, you're not trying to wow the audience, you're trying to wow the people you're serving.
Yes.
That's the point, because otherwise you might as well just become, go on the West End stage, or join the New York Broadway and become a performer, because you're a performer, you're no longer a medium. And as the conversation, we've spoken to, this no longer becomes about the people that we're serving. It becomes about the server, which is not mediumship in the slightest. And
you can see why so many people fall down that rabbit hole.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel my heart goes out to those people who are looking for this, and particularly, your listeners who today, you Google mediumship and you can get anything comes up. And how do you find a good teacher? How do you find someone to explain not just the excitement of what they're experiencing, but also the challenge and darkness of what they may be experiencing, which people attribute to the spirit world, when in actual fact, it's just their own stuff that's coming up. And so it's very, very difficult today for people to find somebody ultimately who knows what they're doing. So it's so easy to fall into this magician consciousness and get stuck there and become the performer instead of the server. And so our job, Brian Robertson and myself, is to take those people in magician consciousness and to say, this is just a stepping stone. And so this is a mediumistic path to a spiritual life. This is the light show. We have to calm that down. We embrace it. It becomes part of your work. But then you then begin the real work of your mediumship, which is the divinity of the experience. and the creating the safe space in which to hold people and hold yourself in their journey of healing and of life.
I think the book as well, one thing I've noticed as well is I was trying to think at the start of the book, where do I place myself within the book in terms of my progress? And then it suddenly absolutely slapped me in the face. And the bit that was very profound for me was the triads. And it was when I started reading the section on the triads, it suddenly made me go, hang on a minute here. I recognize this. Do you mind talking through what the triads are? Because for me, I found it so profound when I read it. I thought I have to ask Simon about this, because I'm sure there's going to be other people here who suddenly get so much from that as I did. It made me realise that, and I know you say this, everyone experiences this, Simon, but when I read the bit about addiction, I thought, hang on a minute, I do have addiction, things I'm not even noticing of. And then I started thinking, hang on a minute, this is having an impact on my mediumship. But to bring this back to the triads, because I'm not even going to attempt, Simon, to explain what these are, because I know that I'm going to make an absolute hash job compared to you. But can you tell us what they are, the
Well,
triads?
basically, Brian Robertson, through his work and my work here at the Inner Quest, we basically wanted to bring back the spiritual tradition within mediumship. And it's an oral tradition. It always has been, always really will be, even though that obviously we now have the means of communication through, Zoom and so on. The triads or triads, depending which part of the world you are to pronounce them, are ultimately recognitions and teachings that we go through various trials and tribulations in life. We go through highs and lows of life. We go through challenges just like anybody else. And I'll just use one of them because we could be here for a long time. But one of the easiest ones to talk about that perhaps really affects mediumship is safety, comfort, and pleasure. And all of us as human beings are driven by these things, these three things. We drive to safety. All of our actions will try to put us into safety. We will drive to pleasure, so whatever gives us pleasure. And we will find comfort. We will do our utmost to be in comfort. So, but primarily, and from a psychological point of view, we will always fail to safe. We will always try to go to safety. So whether it's our relationships, whether it's our connections to other people, whether it's our connections to ourselves, we will do everything in our power to make us feel safe. And even sometimes in our life, we can be unsafe in the safety of being unsafe. So that's why we do stupid things. We look back in our life and go, why did I think that? Why did I do that? Why was I in a relationship with that person in my life? Why was I in that job? Because I felt safe, even though it was, looking back, I know I've progressed, I've moved on, and I'm not in that place anymore. And so the triads themselves are literally areas and points to literally hold on to within mediumistic teaching to bring about reflection and to help us engage within our mediumship. Am I doing this out of safety? Am I doing this out of pleasure? Am I doing this out of comfort? Just give you a brief example, if I may there, Jason. Within mediumship, very, very common, you'll see mediums go to safety in their mediumship. Why? Is because mediumship itself is psychologically very unsafe. If you're talking to somebody in a private sitting or in a demonstration that you've never met before, you are expected to know things, speak to them about things you've never heard before, know about, and expected to get them right. So that's a very unsafe place for the mind. So what happens is that the mind will go for generalities. It will go, well, I've got a grandfather here. You must know somebody beginning with the name of G, George, Jeff, those type of things. So we move there into safety. And that's just normal for the mind to do that. So we have to be conscious of that. We have to feel comfortable. So we have to feel to, as we recognize that, to constantly move us into unsafe places within our own mediumistic training. But from a psychological point of view, your mediumship is also trying to move you into unsafe places in your life, because you may be feeling very safe and very comfortable, maybe with a job, a partner, wherever you are in your life psychologically, but it's actually damaging to you. It may be painful to you, but you're comfortable in the pain. So it's about challenging ourselves to move out of that, so ultimately we can be out of that pain. So the triads themselves, I just use that one as an easier one to remember and to look at, to also wake us up, because ultimately mediumship is about trying to wake us up to the reality of who you are, and also celebrating who you are. That, you hear a lot today on within the work about being the authentic self. Well, you're already authentic. It's just your mediumship wakening you up to what that is. If I can just pick up on about addiction, mediumship in its early stages most definitely encourages addiction. Gordon Higginson taught this very early on in our teaching. I was a smoker back then, and yes, I know it's terrible. A lot of people call it. No, if you mention that, don't you?
Oh, I've fallen
Yes, I
down
was a
that hole
smoker
as well, so don't worry
Yeah,
about
I was a smoker, and Gordon noticed that I was smoking more. And he said, now I just want you to be mindful of that. He said, because your mediumship is actually not causing it, but basically what it is, as you become more sensitive, your mediumship makes you more sensitive psychologically, emotionally. It also creates a sensitivity physically. So whatever gives you pleasure, whatever causes you, because we're all addicts of some description, that's just human beings. So whatever gives you pleasure, whatever gives you comfort and safety, your mediumship will basically heighten that. So whether it's nicotine, whether it's alcohol, whether it's recreational drugs, whether it's shopping, whatever kind of addiction it is, you have to be mindful of that, because in the early stages, it will heighten that. It does dampen down, but in the early stages, it will heighten that. So you have to be mindful of that.
And then I guess these are things, though, that every single person is addicted to something now.
Absolutely.
Because whether it's, well, it can be to the smallest thing. We could be here all night listing addictions. How does one who's going on this mediumship path deal with that? Or do you think it's just their healing is very individual, depending on the trauma of which they've got that they're using to enhance themselves feeling better?
Well,
Or am I
think,
going down a whole other rabbit hole now?
No, absolutely not. I think there's a two-pronged approach to this. Is that while your mediumistic journey will encourage your healing, it will not fix what is already there. What it will do is bring it to the surface for you to look and heal that. So certainly in our work, we will always undertake, to whoever we're speaking to, is encourage them to see professionals in those areas where speciality help is needed, whether that is addiction, whether that is trauma of a personal nature, whether it's abuse in all forms, that we constantly encourage them to move to seeking help and emotional help outside of the mediumistic experience, because mediums are not trauma therapists. They are not therapists of any kind, unless you happen to have gone to university and have gotten your certificates and degrees and what have you, because it's really important not to cross that over. Now, there's a point that I just want to make here. Certainly in North America, there is starting to be a crossover between mediumship and therapy, and it's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous, because you cannot link mediumship in that sense to a form of therapy. it is a spiritual tradition in and of its own. Now, obviously, from my background within psychology and Brian's, anyone that comes in to see us with any kind of traumatic experience or work that they need, we will always encourage them to seek help and support outside of the remit of what we're doing at that time.
It's very interesting. With all of this, then, are we trying to get to a place, and this is what I took from the book, but we're trying to move into the soul will? That's where well, not necessarily the end destination, because I guess it doesn't move there, because you can easily, from my understanding, once you're in soul will, you can slip back and not be in it anymore as quickly
Absolutely.
as you've gone into it. So, and soul will is someone being in their core presence of who they actually are, and that's where we're all striving as mediums to want to be.
Yes, we're trying to be within that place of, if you will, authenticity with what our nature, what the divine, however you see that, is ultimately attempting to express. And it's very difficult to be in that place, particularly today, because we have so many distractions, we have so much stress, we have so many challenges. And the point of this is to, I'm always very, very wary when somebody says, well, actually, I don't feel I want to do that because my soul is not drawn in that way. It's like, okay, why don't you just say, I don't want to do it? Because that's not your soul speaking, that's you.
Yeah.
And because then a lot of people hide behind that to go, oh, well, my spirit's not drawn in that direction. When in actual fact, it's you are by your very words, you are saying you're too afraid to just say, no, I don't want to do that. Or no, I don't want to be that. When in actual fact, if you move into that and really embody those words, then you will be into that idea of will. I am, and the divine will, and the soul will. That's ultimately what we're trying to encourage.
When I read through the book, one thing that I kept coming back to was, how long must this taken to write? Because in some of it, Simon, I even was looking at it thinking, how on earth did you even manage to articulate something in such a way that, because these things are not easy to write about, because a lot of the time, surely you're trying to put human material language on something that is so hard to describe a lot of the time. How long did the book take to write?
It gestated over a number of years, but basically it's a distillation of my I'm trying to remember how old I am now. I'm just over 21, so it's not too long. I've just had a lot of worry. I've probably 35 years plus of doing this. Brian, 40 odd years, 40, my math is appalling. He's the mathematician. 40 odd years of our work and training, and trying to distill that into a book that ultimately is designed to also make people feel uncomfortable. Mediumship is extremely uncomfortable. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be, because it mirrors life, and it's what the point of the book was ultimately to say, look, spirituality is not rainbows and unicorns, though I've got nothing against either, if that's your thing. But it's ultimately about recognizing that these are the profound psychological and spiritual changes that you undergo. And this is a book that can say, this is why you're going through those things, and you're not alone. And our work is at attempting to support people, with you mentioned the courses that we do, the gathering here at on Vancouver Island, we teach, Magician to Mystic, and then Plato's Cave. They are courses, just the retreats, for instance, where we take people to work with their mediumship, their evidential mediumship, and ultimately to then take it into a place of ultimately embodiment, so that they understand it becomes who they are, not what they want to be, so that it becomes, they are just within that experience of their mediumship. So that's what we do here. And, we've been doing those courses for the last, 20 odd years here. And again, this year is no exception. And the point is ultimately recognizing that this is uncomfortable, but by moving you into your discomfort, you ultimately move into the place that you need to be. And that's why we wrote the book. But yes, it gestated over a number of years. And that's why we also put in, because my also passion and background is as a mythologist, of using mythological elements to recognize the transformative story of the work of the medium.
I think that's one thing that I kept coming back to throughout the book was mythology. And it was actually this book that's sparked me on a whole mythology journey that I seem to be on, finding all these kind of ancient things so interesting. And I think the fact that it keeps taking you back through the history, and the book seems to make revelation after revelation at the start of each chapter, I think is really helpful because it kind of brings it back. And even recently, I've been finding myself getting absolutely fascinated by tribal stuff dating back, thousands and thousands of years. When people come to you then, on Vancouver Island, to go to the inner quest, are they tending to arrive to you kind of experienced, or do people come to you really wanting that first kind of awakening moment? Or is it?
It's both. So we have people who come and come from all over the world. We have people who come who are brand new, who are just at the early stages of their journey, or really want to work with their evidential mediumship, and then we take them through that journey, both within the community and also the community of our retreats and courses, and also our online community, because ultimately what we try to do is encourage their mediumship is not developing just in isolation, but it takes a community, whether that's online or whether that's in person, to develop and support and create a safe space for their mediumship and for their spirituality to come to fruition. So literally they come from all backgrounds. Some people have been coming to us, for the last nearly 30 years, and they've grown within their mediumship, they've grown within their understanding, while other people are just completely brand new and are beginning their journey. And ultimately, there is no end goal with this. It is ultimately a journey into self, and the journey into self takes us a journey into the divine. That's the point. So there is no end goal.
I really want to come to your school, and I think it's fascinating to hear that you've had the same people coming back year after year after year. And I think you make so many good points, because I think even when I went into this probably with my magician mindset, I've realised the journey to get to mystic is a very long one, and it could be a journey that some people never make it to that destination. Right. You could go along the whole journey. I think what I liked about the book so much as well, Simon, is it kind of felt to me like it was a very wise uncle talking to you, who wasn't always telling you what you wanted to hear, but was kind of guiding you in the right way of what you had to hear. Can you hear me okay? Did I lose you there for a minute?
Yes, I can, yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes, I can.
So I just want to come on then. So what would be, because there's so many other aspects of the book I could jump into, but what would be your general advice for people wanting to, start a mediumship? Because what I take from the book and everything you say, there's so many different places you can go. But I think what you really draw it back to in the book is how the old ways of learning really were the best in a lot of regards, because you weren't jumping from here, there, and everywhere. But, what advice would you give to people wanting to start on this journey, to start, going on their way to, hopefully one day becoming a mystic?
Well, I think the thing is again, what we've seen here is that the commodification of spirituality today. I saw on the internet just the other day on social media where you could train to be a spiritual teacher. It's like, I mean, how can you train to be a spiritual teacher and get a certificate? I'm a fully qualified spiritual teacher. It's insane. because that's not what it's about. It's ultimately a journey. And the advice I'd give anybody that's starting out is read, read, read. Even if reading is difficult for you for whatever reason, there's so many books now you can listen to, or videos that you can watch. But it's really important to be as skeptical as possible, because there is just so much stuff out there that some of it is just frankly appalling. And do not look for a teacher that is fear-based, that uses fear as a stick to beat you over the head with, that bullies, that intimidates, that wants you to perform and dance around on a platform. That's not what it's about. Because if you want to do that, then as I said, join, become an actor. It's just faster. And so it's really important to recognize that also your experiences that you are having, one, are valid. There will be so many different teachers out there that will describe them in various ways from their own understanding and teachings, which is understandable. But it's also to recognize, and this is really important, if it sounds ludicrous, if it sounds ridiculous, it probably is. That's the important thing. And if a teacher insults your intelligence or uses coercive tactics such as you're letting the spirit world down, or you must to me, you must stay with me, you are my student, I really get the first train out of there, because again, we're looking at coercive tactics. We could use coercive teachings that obviously the teacher themselves needs to go back to the drawing board and needs to carry on their teachings, because obviously it was interrupted somehow. So it's really important to look for teachers that support you, embrace you, challenge you, because it's important to challenge a student, but you can challenge a student in ways that support them rather than, hit them over the head with a blunt instrument, and respect them. And of course, that goes both ways, of course, but it's really important to recognize that and find a teacher that also touches your heart, yourself, and also supports that. So as we say, within the inner quest, within our tradition, it's the journey from the head to the heart. And even though that it may seem a very short journey, it's the longest one you'll make. And so you need teachers to support you on that journey, because we need both places to ultimately help unfold your mediumship.
I love everything you say about really being there as a teacher, as I think this is such an important responsibility, especially when dealing with a subject like mediumship. It's a very difficult thing to even train someone in. I can imagine. How do you even take someone from that place of never having maybe had an experience to lead them into one? So hands down to you. I applaud you, because I can't imagine how difficult that can be at times. How do you kind of I felt like a big driver for this book was to kind of really get something down on paper in writing to try and save the future of spirituality. And I felt there was that big urge throughout when I was reading the book. How do you envision the future of mediumship and spirituality, especially in the context of modern society and technology?
I think we're at a huge transitional point within this work. Even just in the last 30 odd years that I've been working, it has changed drastically. When I came in, we had a hierarchical system where those who had experienced before you, you respected them. And because in all societies, you have a hierarchy of knowledge, experience, and the oral tradition. So, and also when I came in, I was lucky that everybody, no matter most teachers who you went to, with some slight differences, they were all singing from the same hymn sheet. So you generally knew that you were getting a general quality and a good grounding in the basics. Today, again, that has changed. It doesn't exist in many places, which is a concern. But I think we're at a transitional point within the mediumistic tradition where it's exploded in connecting people around the world through technology such as this, which is excellent. But again, the double-edged sword here is that while we can be able to share wisdom, there's a big tradition between wisdom and opinion. And so that's where we are having difficulty now. And I think, and one of the drivers for the book, you're quite right, was of trying to get information out there before it's lost and before we can actually lose the sacred tradition of mediumship that Brian Robertson and myself come from, completely in the ocean of 1,001 so-called mediumistic teachers who, may do a weekend course and suddenly they've set up their own mentorship program on the Monday, because that's not how it works. It never did work that way. It won't work like that. And so the problem is we are getting teachers who are not driving to excellence, they're driving to mediocrity because they are not developed enough themselves to be able to support fully and safely the students under their care. And as a so-called spiritual teacher, we have an ethical duty of care to those people that seek out our teachings. And so while I'm excited about the new avenues of mediumship in the sense that we can connect with, so many more people, I'm also fearful that at the same time, these channels are used to propagate conspiracy theories, ridiculous theories, fearful theories about the spirit and fearful theories about these transpersonal experiences that people are having, instead of recognizing that the ancients and the recent moderns could give context to your experiences and recognize that this is your birthright, not anything to be fearful about, but something to celebrate and to recognize that it makes you human.
I do think that I think you make really valid points there. I think we're obviously in a place where we're more connected to than ever, but I think in my own mediumship development, I found myself almost not knowing which way to turn because I'm information overload. I think sometimes I almost wish I was walking into a library and that was the only book.
Yes.
Because you can find yourself, just going down so many rabbit holes with this. What advice would you give to someone to be able to tell if a teacher's right for them then? Because so much of this is relying on the teacher. In your experience, what separates the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, Simon?
Well, I think if your teacher is talking constantly about how wonderful they are, run. I think if your teacher is saying that they are the beginning, the middle, and end of all knowledge, run. I think if your teacher is not respecting your experience, run. Because ultimately, a good teacher should also not tell you what to do, but encourage you to find your experience so you know what to do. Gordon was brilliant at this because, a lot of people, and I find it amazing now because he seems to be busier now he's gone than when he was here because so many people claim to be talking to him and he's teaching them this, that, and the other. And when I see that, I think, oh, good luck, he never taught me that. Because ultimately, the teachers back then, including Gordon, didn't say, do this, do this, do this. You had to go, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go out, find for yourself, and come back and tell me what your experience was. That is the essence of the mediumistic teacher. If you've got somebody just sitting you in a room and you're doing exercise after exercise after exercise, and you have no clue why you're doing it, other than that it seems to work and it's fun and you're both enjoying yourself on a one-to-one, that's not teaching, that's facilitating. A good teacher should be able to tell you why you're doing a particular exercise, the point of it, how to do it, why you're doing it, and what is then the outcome and the repercussions of that exercise to your emotional and physical and mental well-being. That's what a teacher should be able to do for you. And also a good teacher should be able to say, do you know, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will find out for you. That's the essence of a good teacher, to also know that they are also still learning and still evolving within their own mediumistic experience and also their spiritual understanding.
That's very interesting. I think you make very good points there. I think we live in a land now, I think, which is quite different to perhaps 20 years ago, where we were very much in a workshop sort of culture. Whereas workshops, I guess, are quite a modern phenomenon in a lot of ways. And I suppose one of the most interesting ways to learn is I've never had that style where someone necessarily says, go away and tell me what you come back. Well, not unless it's some sort of task that I'm trying to fulfill. But I can understand why that's a lot more, why it lends itself so much more well to mediumship, because in my experiences, when someone says to me, go and do this this exercise, and all the students, and you're sort of sitting there going, well, I'm not feeling any of this, Simon. I'm not feeling any of this. It's almost preconditioning you as to what you should be feeling, what you should be coming across.
Exactly.
So I do think that makes total sense. I wanted to ask, we are coming to, I'm very mindful of the time here, because I just sit here, Simon, firing questions at you for the next few hours quite easily. And I feel that I've only literally skimmed. If you could see the book now, Simon, I've got about a bazillion post-it notes in it. I've got highlights all over the place. And I thought I've got so much to ask. And then when you get on here, you think, hang on a minute, I'm barely even skimming the surface. I wanted to ask about, you make a point in the book that there's a big difference, and I struggled to get my head around this at the beginning, about the difference between mediumship and just sitting in the presence. And you would think that that would be a simple thing that would be quite easy to work the difference out from. But I think it's something a lot of us developing magicians, trying to get to mystics, get very confused between. Can you dispel some of the myths in what is a meditation and what should we be doing in sitting in the presence? Because the two do overlap, but you make the point that they shouldn't be overlapping because they're both completely separate.
Well, if you're sitting in the power or presence, you're sitting in the presence, you're not meditating.
Yes.
If you're meditating, you're not sitting in the presence. Meditation is a different practice to sitting in the presence, because meditation is ultimately a practice that doesn't necessarily have to have any spiritual connotations whatsoever. You know, meditation now, along with mindfulness, is now being prescribed, you know, for high blood pressure, stress, and so on and so forth. So you don't have to have any kind of spiritual practice associated with it. It is just literally, meditation is ultimately focusing on a thought, a sound, a concept, to bring focus to mind, regulating breath control, and so on and so forth, which ultimately has benefits psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So that's not sitting in the presence. Sitting in the power, and you don't have to sit in the power. You can stand in the power. You can run in the power. You can do the washing up in the power. It doesn't really matter much. But what it is that it is an intention to be within the presence of all things. That's the point. Now, the problem is that it is being taught quite wrongly that you sit in the presence to talk to your spirit friends. No, you don't. You are then having a mediumistic experience. What you're doing, sitting in the presence, is connecting with the divinity that you are, with the divinity of all that is. So ultimately, it is a point of connection, a place of being. It is not a place of doing. As soon as and you see this all the time with students who have come from different places, they start sitting there, and then the next thing you know, you can see their mind going, trying to talk to somebody, or the face goes because they think a guide's coming in and all the rest of it. And it's not. It's just their own mind. And I know this is very controversial, and I know this is going to stir up a hornet's nest, which is great.
We like that here, Simon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because the problem is, as soon as you are sitting within the presence and you try and talk to someone, a communicator in the spirit, or you're trying to talk to so-called intelligence, you're now no longer in the presence. You're using your mediumship to try to have a mediumstic experience. So you're moving from being to doing. Now, of course, the presence itself, the power, is used in all forms of mediumship. But if you will, that's the ocean in which we swim. But ultimately, what you're doing when you're sitting in the presence which again, looking back and going back at the early days here with Gordon, it was a case of just sitting and being. And so now you have people who have gone to teachers who, that's there sitting in the presence, and then they get some vague idea of what it is, then they misteach it, and it just goes on and on and on. But ultimately, it is a case of sitting within the experience, the divinity of self, not to talk to anybody, but to listen. And you are listening, and again, not with your ears and listening for somebody to tell you what to do, but you're listening with this. You're listening so that, if you will, that aspect of what you may want to call soul, you might want to call the divinity, is capable of going back to that ocean of consciousness. That's the point. As we always say here at the Inner Quest, it's the raindrop returning to the ocean. That's when we sit within the presence. That's the point of it. And so there's a big difference between that and meditation, even though it can feel similar, but there is a big difference.
I think the way you've described that is so articulate. I can imagine, Simon, you've spent a lifetime putting together analogies, because it seems to be a real strength of yours, the way you sort of bring these things to life. Would you like to leave us with a closing thought on what you feel, what imparting wisdom would you like to leave our listeners to, who are all absolutely probably found this as fascinating as I have, who are developing in their mediumship abilities? Leave us with a lasting thought of yours, Simon. Not to put you on the spot. I do have a habit of doing this.
No. First of all, I want to say that I admire you, because this is a difficult pathway that you've chosen, and that essence of you has chosen. I really admire you, because this is a difficult pathway. It's not easy by any means, but it is the most worthwhile journey that you can possibly take, because ultimately this is about finding a place where you can be you as hard as you possibly can be. And this world doesn't want you to be you. It wants you to be what it would like you to be, you, by who it thinks you should be. And mediumship has the possibility of finding a place where it's safe for you to be you as much as you want to be. And it's a place in which you are not talking to anybody. You may think you're developing your mediumship to talk to dead people, but you're not. You're developing your mediumship to be present for the living, in order that they can know that eternity begins now, and that you don't have to die to learn how to live. That's the point of this. And that ultimately, that life is, in its spirituality, is what I like to describe as a beautiful trauma. You're going to be beaten up, you're going to be knocked about, you're going to do all of those things which you already have been anyway. But mediumship allows us, just for a brief while every now and then, to pull aside the curtain and just to see the beauty that's there. And because, as Brian Robertson always says, and we say it in the book, beauty can only see beauty. And that's the point of mediumship, to see the beauty within and see the beauty without. And ultimately, to be present and to be that beauty. That's the point of the journey that you are on. And enjoy the journey.
Thank you. Harming the Elephant springs to mind from the book. Very nicely there. Simon, thank you so much. It's been so nice to talk to you, and I think you probably don't realise the profound impact you have when you talk for an hour, because I'm sure loads of us are going to find ourselves going back and listening to that all over again. And thank you for your kind words.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, that conversation, it's made me want to read his book all over again. I know it's a good book because there's so many corners folded on it. It's half the book's highlighted. It's got notes all over. That's a sign of a good book. I loved that conversation with Simon, and honestly, I could have spoken to him for so much longer. Over the next few weeks on the Soul Sync, we have got some truly remarkable guests. I'm really excited to share some of these interviews with you. A big thank you for joining me on this week's episode of Soul Sync. If you want to stay in the loop with the Soul Sync podcast and know when new episodes are out, it's really easy. All you need to do is simply hit the follow show button wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do leave me a review. I love reading them. I love hearing from you. And if you want to get involved in the conversation and the community, just go to the show notes where you get all the social links. Now, if you have suggestions for future episodes, there might be a guest you'd love to see featured, or you might even like to be a guest yourself. Simply email me at hello@jasonpaulmedium.com. Your stories and ideas are the heartbeat of Soulsing, and your input really is invaluable. Thank you for all your emails. I love reading them. I'm Jason Paul. This is the Soulsing. Until next time, goodbye.